Hey, what's going on, role players? It's the Bard here and welcome back to the corner. So today's video is going to be something a little bit different. So we've been at this role playing thing for a while now, and we think we've got the rules down pat. But even so, even the most experienced of us are still making mistakes when it comes to some very basic rules. The problem is though, is that we fall into these little habits where we're not really doing the things that we should be, especially when we're running the game. Or if we're playing certain types of characters, we're not using the mechanics in the way they were intended. So the idea behind this video is not just to show off some of the awesome feats that we're not really using, but really to highlight how they're used and how they apply when the rules are being interpreted correctly. So not only is this video intended to help both new and experienced players, it's also intended to help DMs as well in crafting that more authentic experience when we're roleplaying. So with that out of the way, let's get on to this high tier play video and start talking about some awesome feats. So picking feats is a little bit tricky. We don't have as many opportunities to take them as we would like, and we really need to get our ability scores in a place where we can still be effective. But even so, feat selection can add to the personality of a character just as much as it can add to the effectiveness of one. The first feat I want to talk about is mobile. Your speed increases by 10 feet. When you use the dash action, difficult terrain doesn't cost you extra movement on that turn. And when you make a melee attack against a creature, you don't provoke opportunity attacks from that creature for the rest of the turn, whether you hit or not. I think this is a particularly great feat, and it's useful for a lot of different characters, but especially for rogues. The thing is though, when I'm playing and not running the game, I notice that certain rogue players will say, I come out of hiding, I attack from advantage, and then I use my bonus action to hide again. That's not a bad idea, but the problem is it doesn't really explore how you got back to your hiding place. Essentially what would have to happen is the rogue would move, it would attack, it would move again, it would provoke an opportunity attack, and then it would be able to use its bonus action to hide. That's a very risky maneuver to try against high hit point creatures that you're not likely to take out in a single action. What a rogue should be doing is coming in, attacking, using the bonus action to disengage, and then moving out again. However, you aren't going to be able to hide on that same turn, because hide is typically an action, or for rogues, it's a bonus action. The mobile feat really has you covered here, because you're able to move in, make the attack, move away without having to take the disengage action, and still get to hide using your bonus action. Additionally, the extra movement is really important. It could be that if you're hiding behind something, you may need to climb over it in order to hide behind it. As such, it's going to use up a small portion of your movement speed, so having that extra 10 feet on hand is really useful. So the mistake a lot of players and DMs are making is that they're allowing the rogues to come out, make their attack, and slip away without any reprisal. Now you either have to make the decision, if you want to hide, you have to risk the attack, and if you're going to disengage, you're not going to be able to hide again. At least with this feat, you can cover both of those things, and you can do all of it in the same round. It's an easy mistake to make, but I've seen it slip under the radar so many times. The next feat I want to talk about is Observant, and it really ties into what we were just talking about as well. The feat allows you to increase your intelligence or wisdom score by 1 to a maximum of 20. If you can see the creature's mouth while it's speaking a language you understand, you can interpret what it's saying by reading its lips. And you have a +5 bonus to your passive wisdom perception and passive intelligence investigation scores. This doesn't seem like much of a feat until you realise the necessity of the passive wisdom perception stat. The game relies on you being able to find things, so the DM will often ask you for a wisdom perception roll, or if you're looking for something, an intelligence investigation roll. Seems straightforward so far, right? Well, one of the mistakes I see DMs making is that when they ask you for such a roll, they're giving it to you for free. In many cases, a wisdom perception or an intelligence investigation roll should cost an action to use. Let's take the rogue scenario again. Your character hides, you roll your hide check, and then it's opposed by the perception wisdom of the creature that's looking for you. However, if the creature is actively looking for you, it has to use its action and it then makes a roll. If the creature is not actively looking for you, then it uses its passive wisdom perception or passive intelligence investigation, depending on the nature of the check that you're trying to emulate. The key word here is actively. Active searching is something that's particularly important, especially when it comes to combat. If a creature is hiding from you, for example, you should be using an action when you're actively searching for it. This will help to keep the game fair and balanced, because if a creature is hiding, using its action to do so, then you come along and get a free perception roll when looking for it, then you can take any action you want. And that really isn't going to be in favour of the hiding creature, because it doesn't really get to do anything. Creatures should be using actions in order to hide. Therefore, if any creature is looking for the thing that's hiding, it should be using an action to search. That's just an easy way to remember it, but it keeps the game fair and balanced. So what does all this have to do with the observant feat? Again, say you're in a combat, and a creature starts to hide from you because it plans to sneak up on you at some point. You're using your passive perception to try and spot where these creatures may be, because you still want to take actions, you still need to cast spells, you still need to battle with certain creatures, and in many cases you cannot afford to not be taking actions against the creatures that you're fighting. But despite the ruckus of combat, there's always the chance that you might catch something out of the corner of your eye, hence the passive perception stat. This feat adds an enormous +5 bonus to your wisdom perception and your intelligence investigation when they're made passively. Your passive stat is 10 plus your wisdom modifier. Additionally, you might have proficiency, and on top of that you may even have expertise as well. But some characters don't have proficiency bonuses to their perception, so they're relying solely on their wisdom modifier. This might give you a score of maybe 11 or 12, which isn't really very high when you're using it to contest a creature's stealth roll. That +5 bonus is absolutely enormous when you're using the rules correctly. Furthermore, it can really speed up the way the game is played, especially with combat, because you're cutting down on the amount of rolls that have to be made. If the DM describes a creature as coming out and stabbing you from stealth, it's not then down to the player to really say, how come I didn't get a perception check to try and find it? It comes down to the fact that they had a perception check, they just didn't realise that they were making it. Once you get a lot more familiar with passive checks and how they work, the game becomes a lot more fluent, combats become a bit more intense, and additionally, if a creature has to look for something that's hiding, it has to make that decision, do I take an action or do I actively look for that thing that might sneak up on me? So now I want to talk about the Skulker feat. You can try to hide when you are lightly obscured from the creature from which you are hiding, when you are hidden from a creature and miss it with a ranged attack, making the attack doesn't reveal your position, and dim light doesn't impose disadvantage on your wisdom perception checks relying on sight. So there's really a lot to unpack here. Skulker is giving you a lot more hiding options. The thing that I find really interesting about this feat though is the last thing that it does, which is the fact that dim light doesn't impose disadvantage on your wisdom perception checks relying on sight. Now, not all creatures have dark vision. Creatures like humans, halflings, and dragonborn, they don't get access to that. So they have to rely on some kind of light source. Be that a torch, a produce flame spell, a light cantrip, you get the idea. Many spells that create light say that they create bright light in a particular radius, and then create dim light in a certain distance beyond that. So for creatures that can't see in the dark, beyond a certain point, they should still be getting wisdom perception checks, but they should be getting them at disadvantage. Furthermore, if you're using the passive rules, as we've already talked about, then they should be making any passive checks at -5, and then at normal rate once they get to within the bright light area. One typical mistake that I make is to describe things beyond the range that everyone can see. So the best way for me to do this is to describe what people can see when it comes to light sources, and then what other people can see when it comes to things like dark vision. The problem with that, however, is characters who have dark vision usually have it out to something like 60 feet, so they're going to see it first. This gives the characters who don't have dark vision a chance to technically react in a certain way on knowledge that they don't have. When it comes to the Skulker feat, this usually doesn't become as much of an issue. Because the dim light doesn't impose disadvantage to anyone with the Skulker feat, you're actually technically then able to get a normal perception roll at twice the distance you would normally be allowed if you're using a light source and don't have access to dark vision. So in a dark environment, a human with a torch can have a normal perception check up to 20 feet, and then a perception check with disadvantage for 20 feet beyond that. With this feat, you're essentially getting a normal wisdom perception check for the entire 40 feet. This is also a really scary feat just in the way that the abilities it has work together. A skulking character can essentially hide anywhere that lightly obscures them, and then, because of the fact that making a ranged attack doesn't reveal your position if you miss the creature, they can keep attacking that creature until they eventually get the hit. Yes, hitting the creature will then reveal their position, but it essentially counts as a surprise, and there are certain creatures and classes that get a big benefit from attacking from surprise. So we've looked at a few feats and how they work in relation to the mechanics of the game, but now I just want to go over a few feats that I think are pretty good, but I don't see any players taking. So the first feat I want to talk about is Drow High Magic. Now before everyone starts commenting, well duh, no one's taken it because not everyone's playing Drow, that's not the point. The point I'm trying to make here is that there are feats like this one that give you additional spells per day that you can use as abilities that really help to complement your spellcasting ability or even add a few spells if you didn't have them already. So Drow High Magic, Wood Elf Magic, Fey Teleportation, even Magic Initiate, these are all really good feats. Not only is this a good feat because of what it gives you, but it's also a really nice themed feat for the role-playing aspect. I've got an idea for a Drow Cleric that I'd like to play, and I really want her to have this feat as well. Not only is this providing some very useful low-level spells that my character could use, but it also provides a bit of background that suggests that she's more than just a class combined with a race combined with some feats. It becomes a real living, breathing thing, and that's part of what I think these feats are also good for, character development. As far as these kinds of feats go, however, Drow High Magic I think is one that is actually particularly good. Detect Magic at will, which is amazing, so it's essentially the same as what the Warlock would get, but if you were a Drow Warlock, you wouldn't need to waste that invocation, you could take this feat instead, so that's really nice. Additionally, Levitate is a great spell, crowd control, utility, problem solving, I really like that, and Dispel Magic. Dispel Magic is a great spell, but I sometimes feel it's one of those spells that I don't know if I have enough room for in my prepared list of spells per day. When I prepare spells for any spellcasting character, I like to think, how am I going to use this and how often is it going to come into play? Will I be needing to use this on the regular? And with something like Dispel Magic, the answer is typically no. It's one I want to have, but I don't know if I can always afford the space to put it in there. Dispel Magic's one of those spells that's undeniably useful, but unfortunately it's not one that you're going to need all the time. You may not even cast it at all during a day, meaning it's completely wasted when it comes to your list of prepared spells. This helps get around it in the sense that you have the spell available if you need it and you don't have to prepare it, and even in the case of certain types of clerics, such as Trickery for example, which always have Dispel Magic prepared, you can always use your innate ability to cast Dispel Magic first before having to go to work on your spell slots. That way, if you need to, you can keep those spell slots open and usable for other things during the adventure. So when you think about it in that context, the same is true for other feats as well. So again, if you're using things like Fey Teleportation, you've always got a Misty Step available to use. If you're using something like Wood Elf Magic, there's always a Long Strider when you need it. The more I read about these kind of feats, the more I like them. They're useful in the sense that they add some flavour to your character, they're useful spells that you're going to want to use periodically, but more so, we don't have access to as many spell slots as we used to have, regardless of what kind of caster we are. So having these extra abilities is always going to come in handy at some point. The next feat I want to talk about is Medium Armor Master. For most characters that use medium armors, they are probably going to try to get themselves some kind of breastplate. Breastplate is AC 14, up to 2 points of additional AC for dexterity, and it doesn't have any disadvantage on stealth checks. If you have Medium Armor Master and you have the dexterity to back it up, that is a score of 16 or higher, you're essentially getting an additional point of dexterity, but you can also then go ahead and wear half plate for an additional point of AC. This would then give you AC 15 plus 3 for your dexterity. Additionally, you don't have the dexterity stealth check penalty, you don't have the disadvantage on that, so you can get some really good defense out of this feat. This feat with half plate, 16 dexterity and a shield, all basic stuff, gives you an AC of 20. That's before even incorporating any kind of magical items or any kind of spells to boost your protection. Half plate with 16 dexterity and this feat is the equivalent of full plate mail. That's half the cost. That's £25 worth of weight allowance you don't have to concern yourself with. And you don't need 15 strength either, because you're using half plate and not full plate. And you will never have to worry about your armor getting in the way when you're doing your dexterity stealth. There's not really much more I can say about this. There aren't really cool combos that you can do with this feat, but it will allow you to get some of the highest defense in the game for your character, even though you're not using the heaviest armor. Finally, I want to talk about skilled. You gain proficiency in any combination of 3 skills or tools of your choice. This is a great feat for helping you get access to really important proficiencies that you may not have got from your backgrounds or from your class benefits. There are some skill proficiencies that some people would consider to be absolutely mandatory in this game. Persuasion, perception, and then probably stealth and maybe deception. But it's not just skill proficiencies, it's also tool proficiencies you can get with this feat. And some people seem to think that tool proficiencies aren't necessary. Absolutely not. Some of them are 100% you must have them. For example, thieves' tools. Rogues get access to thieves' tools, and if you have the criminal or urchin background, you can get access to thieves' tools proficiencies with that as well. I can't think of any more off the top of my head, but maybe there are. But the point is, maybe you don't want to be a rogue, maybe you don't want to have the background of urchin or criminal, and you might want to be something else. At least with the skilled feat, you can get access to the proficiencies you need. Another useful tool proficiency is the herbalism kit. You can use this to make simple healing potions. This means that as a cleric, you don't have to continually use your spells to heal. You can always give potions to your party to help them heal up. Also, I think the assassin archetype is the only one that gets access to the poisonous kit. The thing is, there are other characters beyond assassins who are going to want to use poisons. Certain evil warriors might want to coat their weapons with it, and certain races have an affinity for poisons as well. Drow is one example that comes to mind. So you may want a character that's very good at making those kind of things, but the particulars of your class or your background don't reflect that. So you can then get access to those tool proficiencies by taking the skilled feat. Additionally, characters who have tool proficiencies can be of use when it comes to crafting items, even magical items they can help with, providing they have the correct tool proficiencies. And this feat is also great for adding little tweaks to your character that aren't defined by their class or their background. Maybe you want to be able to play an instrument, but you don't want to be a bard and you're not an entertainer per se, but you just want to have something that you can do maybe when you're sitting around the campfire. Whatever it is that adds that little bit of extra character to the thing that you're making is always going to be of value. This is a solid feat, not just because it gives you bonuses where you need them, but also because it helps to drive your character development. Your background proficiencies are there to tell you what you were, your class proficiencies tell you what you are, but the proficiencies you get from the skilled feat represent anything and everything that you could be. So that was the D&D high tier play video for Feats. So I'm hoping this has been useful to players and DMs of all skill levels. There's mechanic clarifications in there, there's character building exercises, there are potential bonuses that you can use to help improve your gameplay, so there should be a little bit of something for everybody. I'm actually quite tempted to carry on these high level play videos, maybe even make a little bit of a mini series out of it. So maybe I'll do one on, say, like ready actions, or maybe even a small series on a character progression from level 1 all the way up to level 20. It would be a comprehensive look at everything that the character would need, from alignment to starting gear to if it's cost efficient, should you consider buying it yourself rather than taking the packages, the spells you might want to take, what's useful, what's not, and we can all work together to get a really detailed and really comprehensive character build from the start that new players can look at, get the information out of it, and then get into playing quickly without too much headache. And of course, on top of that, it would help people to understand their rules that much more clearly, which always then leads to a much more fluid and much more enjoyable gaming experience. So that's the end of today's video. If you liked it, please leave a like. If you've got something to say on the subject, there is a comment section down below. If you're new to the channel and you are not yet subscribed, why not consider doing so, and there is a notification bell there so that you can be informed of everything that comes up from the channel. Be sure to share this about with your friends if you want to help the channel grow, and I will see you guys next time at the gaming table.